Terrans are a peculiar species, Commander Kragath began, his voice reverberating through the massive hall of the Galactic Academy. His clawed, obsidian hand activated the holo-display, and a three-dimensional projection of an enormous Terran battleship materialized before the eyes of the eager cadets. You believe it's their warships that we fear most? You're mistaken. The hall was filled with the galaxy's finest, young officers who would one day lead the coalition. Each one of them had studied the infamous Terran fleet, but this was different. Kragath, his scarred face catching the cold blue light of the projection, had survived a battle against them. His piercing gaze swept over the silent room. Look at this, he gestured to the colossal warship. Its angular, armored bulk towered within the hologram. They call it a Steel Wraith. The Terrans don't bother with elegance or efficiency. They build for one purpose: devastation. A cadet raised a hand, the eagerness barely contained. But Commander, how can they hold their own with such small fleets? We've studied their numbers. They're always outmatched. Kragath's lip curled. Numbers mean little when you face Terrans. It's their minds, their adaptability, that makes them deadly. A hushed silence settled over the room. Kragath's chest rose as he drew in a breath, his memories returning. He had faced the Steel Wraiths and lived to recount the experience. The Battle of Clyrius, he began, his voice low. You've all read about it in your studies. But I was there. The atmosphere tightened. The Battle of Clyrius was legendary, a moment when a numerically superior fleet had been wiped out by a handful of Terran warships. The cadets leaned in, riveted by the chance to hear firsthand from a veteran. Kragath changed the holo-display, revealing the battleground. We had them surrounded. 20 of our best ships against a small Terran fleet of 5 Steel Wraiths. We thought we had victory in hand. He paused, his voice deepening with a grim edge. We were fools. One cadet, taller than the rest, raised a brow. But how could they? Kragath cut him off. They lured us in. The Terrans are nothing if not cunning. They let us believe we had the upper hand. When we charged in, convinced our firepower would overwhelm them, the Wraiths moved like predators. Silent. Lethal. The holo shifted, showing the moment when the coalition fleet closed on the Terrans. They didn't rush. They moved methodically, like they had all the time in the galaxy. We mistook it for hesitation, but it was cold calculation. They led us straight into a debris field, where our larger ships struggled to maneuver. But the Wraiths, Kragath's eyes narrowed. They danced through it with ease. His voice grew sharper. They unleashed everything. Missiles, rail cannons, energy beams. It wasn't their weapons that struck fear into us, though. A cadet, clearly puzzled, asked, "Then what did?" Kragath's expression darkened. They adapted. Within minutes, they dissected our strategies and exploited every vulnerability. 5 of our ships were gone before we even understood what was happening. Murmurs spread across the room. Another cadet muttered, "Terrans, they're unpredictable," only for Kragath to silence him. They don't fight by any set of rules. They innovate in real time. You think you've pinned them down, but they'll twist your own tactics against you. He gestured at the display, now showing a Steel Wraith ramming a coalition cruiser. They don't care about losses. A Terran will sacrifice anything if it leads to victory. A heavy silence filled the room. Kragath's words weighed on the cadets, many of whom had studied the efficiency of the Terran forces but had never truly grasped the terror they instilled. They don't fight with ships, Kragath continued, his voice cold and deliberate. You're fighting their minds. And those minds are as dangerous as any weapon. The projection faded, leaving only the dim lighting of the academy. Tomorrow, you'll study their armor, their weapon systems, and their technology. But today, remember this. The true power of the Terrans lies in their ability to think faster than you. And that, cadets, is more dangerous than any firepower. The holo-display flickered back to life, casting blue light across the room. Kragath clenched his fists as the memory of the battle played out in his mind. We believed we had them, our best strategists, leading the charge. Tactics we perfected over generations. But the Terrans... He shook his head, his voice a low growl. We fired everything we had. Plasma barrages, missile storms, energy blasts. The battlefield was a blaze of destruction, a sight to behold. One cadet near the front, barely breathing, asked, "But they survived?" Kragath's face hardened. They didn't just survive. They thrived. With a flick of his wrist, the holo displayed the Terran fleet emerging from the wreckage, unscathed. They predicted our moves, shielded just enough to withstand the heaviest firepower. And when the smoke cleared, they struck, hard and fast. Another cadet, incredulous, began, "But how did they—" "Because," Kragath snapped, "while we reloaded, they were already repositioning. They didn't wait. They countered, and when they did, they tore through us." The display shifted again, showing the Terran fleet slicing through the coalition formation. Their attacks came from every angle, coordinated, relentless. They moved as a single, deadly unit. Kragath's voice grew tense, charged with the same dread he'd felt during the battle. We weren't just outgunned. We were outthought. The cadets sat frozen, the gravity of the commander's words sinking in. Kragath stared down at them, his tone softening into a grim warning. The Terrans fight with everything they have. Every weapon, every tactic, every trick. They fight like there's no tomorrow. And just when you think you've got them cornered, that's when they're at their deadliest. Silence stretched across the hall as Kragath's words settled in. The cadets were left with a sobering realization. The Terran fleet wasn't just feared for its size or strength. It was feared for its unpredictability, its ingenuity. "They don't fear death," Kragath murmured, his voice echoing in the now quiet hall. "What they fear is failure." He looked over the room, the faces of the cadets still reflecting awe, confusion, and fear. But his lesson wasn't over. "The Battle of Clyrius wasn't just a defeat for us," Kragath continued, pacing slowly. "It was a lesson, one we didn't understand until it was too late." Turning back to the cadets, he locked eyes with each of them, driving the point home. Terrans don't fight like anyone else in the galaxy. They don't rely on superior tech or brute force. Their greatest weapon is their adaptability. They learn faster than any species we've encountered, and they will take your best strategies, your best ships, and use them against you. A palpable tension filled the room as the cadets processed his words. "We had them outnumbered, outclassed in every way," Kragath said, shaking his head. "But to Terrans, numbers don't matter. They think faster, act faster, and when you make a mistake, they seize it." One cadet finally broke the silence, his voice trembling. "Sir, how do we defeat them?" Kragath stared at him, a long moment passing before he responded. The holo flickered, bringing back the image of the Steel Wraiths, floating ominously in space. "You don't," Kragath replied darkly. "Not unless you learn to think like them." The cadets exchanged worried glances, but Kragath silenced their murmurs with a single wave of his hand. "This isn't about firepower or fleet size. It's about strategy. You want to survive a battle against the Terrans? You'll need to outthink them. That's your only chance." His final words echoed in the darkened room. "And never forget, their greatest weapon isn't their ships. It's their minds." As the holo shut off and the room plunged into silence once again, Kragath stepped away from the podium. "And if you ever face the Terran fleet, you'd better be ready for a battle of wits, or start praying." With that, he left the cadets to contemplate the terrifying reality of facing the most dangerous minds in the galaxy.